Hello, everyone. I thank you for. I want to thank the CBC for inviting me again to participate in the fourth research workshop in blockchain for construction, and I'm here to present the work we've been doing in decentralized autonomous organizations in AEC. It's unfortunate that I can't be there. However, there is a very good reason for it. Between changing jobs. So currently I work as a principal lecturer at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen in Scotland. But from middle of September, I will be moving to Antwerp in Belgium, where I will be an associate professor of architecture and visual culture. At the same time, I'm a very active member in ArchiDAO, or let's say one of the people who are trying to build the first architecture decentralized autonomous organization. And we will be able to see part of the innards of what this looks like in terms of building the smart contract that might run a DAO that deals with architecture, engineering, construction. And I've published extensively on blockchain for construction. Latest kind of cumulative, let's say, work is the book Blockchain for Construction, which was edited by me and Davide Lombardi, and I've written some of the chapters. So today we will be looking at decentralized autonomous organizations in AEC with a particular flavor on design rather than the whole gamut of services of AEC. This is because I'm an architect, and most of my experience with AEC industry comes from architecture and architectural design. However, I will be providing, where possible, avenues that connect architectural design with construction and the work we've been doing. And initially, we will be discussing concepts based on academic prototypes and theoretical work we've done in the past. Then we'll discuss a little bit about governance and tokens. And we will try to conclude with an ArchiDAO example and also a look behind the scenes of what we're currently doing with the DAO and the kind of tools we're trying to both use and build at the same time. Unfortunately, I can't see the room, so if there is any questions you might want during the talk, just signal, and I'll try to answer that question, or we can have a discussion at the end. Any of these is fine by me. So I will begin by looking at some of our first work with Davide Lombardi and Vasim Jabi about 4 years ago when we started this, or we started conceptualizing essentially DAOs working in the area of building information modeling to blockchain integration. So we came into this by thinking that blockchain as a, first of all, storage technology, we kind of thought about it as a decentralized database, could replace the database that could potentially replace the database that lies behind building information modeling. I can tell you now that this was a bit of a naive idea we had, but that's the nature of research, right? You have naive ideas and then you go poking around to try and find how you can validate them or find whether they're true or not. And through that BIM to blockchain integration, we thought that you could actually already connect the whole life cycle of AEC, going from design to construction to operation, all of this kind of linked in a single thread of information through smart contracts. And already in our work there, the idea of governance appears, where members of the DAO actually make decisions on the integration. And again, the question remains, how do you actually make those decisions, right? You can think of smart contracts as a vehicle, but there are many other ways you can structure that relationship. And the first prototype we built looked essentially at decentralizing optimization of design activities. So we looked at a design problem, both from the point of view of geometry optimization, but also from the point of view of, for example, optimizing certain structural properties of an piece of architecture. And we came up with 5 smart contracts. One would be like the problem smart contract. Another one would be the solution smart contract. And then you would have a building information manager smart contract that would talk to your BIM platform. For ease of use, we use Rhino Grasshopper. I know some of you might not think Rhino and Grasshopper can be used for BIM, but they can with the proper plugins. And we also provided a web interface so that we would make usability easy. And we also started using the interplanetary file system to host files, essentially because public and open blockchains are very, adverse and expensive to actually hosting large amount of data. So we already have appearing a two-tier architecture where you have the Ethereum blockchain hosting the smart contracts and the logic behind the project, and you have IPFS taking on any kind of file that you might want to manage. And you have external agents, right? So essentially what we would consider architects trying to provide a solution to the smart contract. Then the internal logic decides whether your solution is accepted or not. With design optimization problems, it's easy to do so since you can reduce the problem into a single or a set of numbers, but other design problems are not so easy. So we'll see another question on governance later on how we solve the idea that you can make decisions about a design problem as a collective. Now, this architecture provides 2 kind of general directions, essentially. One is the idea that you are collaborating with other people to solve the problem without actually needing. So the architecture allows you not to need any kind of trust or knowledge of what the other, of who the other person or entity is. And in this scenario, essentially, our system can note designer 2 contribution, and then it can synchronize all files between designers using IPFS and the blockchain. And then on a later stage, designer 3 comes up with a better solution by working on the back of designer 2. And at some point in the future, when we decide to halt the whole process, funds can be shared between designers 2 and 3. So between anybody who has helped us advance the design and make it better through time. So this is a collaborative scenario. However, you can also have a truly competitive scenario where you do micropayments individually. And here the problem setter can elect whether to keep the designers separate or still continue to share good designs between the pool of designers that participate into the system. And through this, you have essentially, in a very kind of, let's say, simplistic point of view, a set of designers that collaborate, and the problem halts when time runs out. And at that point, all agents get paid in ETH proportionally to the value of their contribution. I didn't mention that in all of our prototypes, we're using the Ethereum blockchain 4 years ago as a layer 1, and currently we're investigating a layer 2. And yeah, in the opposite of collaboration, you get a competition that essentially is run on the internet, decentralized to blockchain. And the stakeholder who is expecting a solution can check it and trigger payment via escrow, and only the design agent with the best solution gets paid. On the left, you will see a very simple structure of the launching of a design problem on an Ethereum smart contract. This has already been published as a code. We also wrote a Grasshopper plugin that runs locally. And anybody who needs the code for this, please let me know, and I can provide it. It's already public on GitHub, as most of our work. However, at the moment, it's a little bit depreciated as it is 4 years old. Now, coming from this idea, we started learning a little bit more on how we could structure certain things on BIM to blockchain integration, and we thought of the idea of decentralized BIM, where you would essentially try to run a BIM model and a BIM project, not through the idea of saving every time the full file, but only recording on IPFS and on cryptographic passes on blockchain the differences between different versions. In that way, you can essentially record on the blockchain the whole history of developing a BIM model, whether you're an architect or a consultant, or whether this BIM model relies on just the architectural design phase, or is potentially also a BIM model that reflects other digital twin reality, and so on and so forth. And through this architecture, you can have a set of people who provide this infrastructure as a common pool of resources, or at least as a decentralized pool of resources, and they are incentivized to be paid every time there is a significant change done to the model. There are certain other nice business models that can develop through this, but I won't go into them so much. In theory, you could develop the equivalent of a decentralized Spotify for architecture, where you record, unique solutions that can be tokenized and reused later on. You could also develop within those governance systems. However, we haven't done so yet, so I'll just move on to the next example. Okay, the optimization paradigm gave us essentially the opportunity to look into the idea of collective governance of a design project, and understanding that not all aspects of architectural design can be reduced into numbers, and we can't have a particular mathematical optimization of everything in design. There are certain qualities in design that rely on a human factor, or let's say are fuzzy enough that cannot be reduced into optimization problems. And this is actually what gives rise to thinking of design as a wicked problem discipline rather than as a mathematical one. In that sense, we started looking at the idea of optionality, right? So developing options as designs, and then figuring out through this kind of space of design solutions which one is the best. And we kind of took the example of voting to make use of the human expertise that is available onto a DAO. And through this, you see a very simple diagram where there is a particular design problem. Then you use safe grammars to develop options. You subject these to certain parts of analysis. And then this actually goes on to as a file onto IPFS, and then is subject to voting for the DAO. And then this gets further developed. And obviously, this is just designer one. You again have various designers providing options and solutions to this particular issue. And we not only thought about the theoretical aspect where voting would also have certain weights based on experience or novelty. We borrowed this idea from the H index and reputation that researchers normally have, right? So a lot of times you would expect that someone with more experience would be able to have a better root analysis of all of the options. But at the same time, you want essentially any kind of young designer who comes up with innovative solutions to still be able to participate. And the idea there is that the voting actually comes with certain weights that multiply the weight of or the how much you take into account the opinion and vote over experienced member staff. And of course, here we can still have the designers who are proposing solutions can be part of the DAO, or at least this is how we conceptualize. And we tested this by using a software which is again depreciated at the moment. It's still live. It's called DAOstack. And we went through a simple example of developing a safe grammar for apartment floor plans in Suzhou in Jiangsu province in China. And you can see here a simple grammar that develops layout apartments, ends up with a really basic flat layout. And then we use these outlines and layout to build whole towers of these apartments. And then the towers are being subject to sunlight analysis according to the regulations on that exist in Suzhou and Jiangsu. And they specify essentially that every part of an apartment, of the space, needs to have at least 3 hours of daylight, of direct daylight during the day. So essentially, any kind of solution that makes it a little bit more complicated, potentially with self-fading or hiding parts of the spaces, might not be a good solution. So through this, we develop a lot of these solutions, put them on DAOstack, and use DAOstack's reputation to vote essentially and showcase how this might work in design scenarios where you are looking not only onto sunlight, but you might also be looking into configurations of apartments, which again can be understood as something that needs a human to evaluate their functional effectiveness. So I'll go to a little bit more fresher work from the last chapter of the book and talk about governance and tokens. And this will be a nice segue to start describing the moment we are now in ArchiDAO and how we are trying to build the common infrastructure that can run the DAO in a much more sophisticated manner. So the last chapter of the book describes what we call collective digital factories for buildings. And this is a combination of design agents and software working together to improve essentially a building information model through certain aspects that normally are overlooked in most architectural design phases. So the things that we tried to do here is try to connect incentives, try to connect carbon performance and waste reduction of a building with financial incentives. And we tried to conceptualize how could this work both from the point of view of governance and smart contracts, but also how you would work out the connection between the software and the activity of the design team to understand that. So very simply, the cycle you saw works where you have a set of funds, and on the other side you have a design team made out of design agents, and this again can be humans and can be also any kind of machine learning model that can help you in the design. And the way to participate here in this design team is that you need to stake a token, and this gets exchanged with a governance token. And the stakes essentially work as a way to lock yourself into the collective incentives of a design team. So the goal here is not to act as a single agent, but to actually pull resources together and make sure that you're trusted as part of the team. It also works as a disincentive mechanism, right? So when you have tokens staked, any kind of malicious action can then make you lose your stake or your governance. And if you lose your stake, you lose essentially any kind of financial incentive you might have onto the project. And the idea there is that we connect the design team with the topologic model. This is based on the software created by my good friend Vasim Zabi at Cardiff, which is, let's say, a model abstraction of an architectural asset, which then generates a BIM, an energy model, and a waste and circular model. So far, we've done the BIM and energy model, but not the waste and circular model. This is still work under process, and you have essentially a smart contract that monitors the state change. You go through design iterations, and every time you evaluate the resulting models, and at every step of the way, you might see improvement essentially in every one of the models. And through that, you go and connect all of the optimizations that are taking place with a reduction in carbon footprint on the building, both from the operational and embodied carbon, waste reduction in terms of optimizing your processes, building performance increase, again, based on what the model says, and probably a productivity increase. And through smart contracts, you can then either use a bonding curve to increase the stakes, to increase the reward that is related to the stakes, or directly increase the percentage of the funds that are signed with the stakes. So through this kind of mechanism, this circular mechanism, you can essentially connect the behavior of design agents in a AEC team, so that they are not in competition with one another, but act in the same way that they would act in an IAPD team, in an integrated project delivery team. And also you can incentivize things that are potentially good for the common good, but are overlooked in current construction projects. And I'll pause here to see if there are any questions from the room.
Hi, Theo, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
So any questions currently? So I have a question in respect to, this seems to be kind of an emergent design service that is provided for construction. And I'm not quite sure about the details of the funding mechanism, especially if you have a mix. For example, you mentioned an automation process there where you have a shape grammar or an optimization algorithm. Are you also considering an agent, something that is automated, an algorithm that is running the system and could also get an incentive?
Yes. Yes. So the idea here is that all of the things that are attributed here as a designer and not as an evaluator would actually be done partly via algorithms or AI models, so machine learning models that produce valid solutions. There is obviously a philosophical and practical question of who is, could you incentivize the AI to do certain things? And there is also the question of agency. Do AI models or algorithms kind of capture the intent of their creator and who could be kind of governing those AI models. I would say, at least in our current thinking in Archida, that we're looking at blockchain also as a technology to govern those processes that create and incentivize AI into, let's say, good behavior, if you will. But yes, very particularly the idea that we have designer 1, designer 2, and designer 3, or we call them design agents, goes back to the idea that these don't have to be human. So far, we have allowed only, in our conceptual understanding, only humans to vote, but I'm certain there will be scenarios where you could actually allow part of that decision to be taken over by AI. I have no idea right now what would that envelope of constraint be, but I think it's a really interesting research question.
Yeah, so my question then, I have another question then that follows from the previous one. So who gets the credit for the AI algorithm? Who gets for, the creator of the AI algorithm? Does he or she get credit?
I think that's a multi-pronged question, and I would say also multidisciplinary, right? So part of the deal here is if you also get, if I can extend your question, right? So if I ask about the credit, do I also ask about the liability, right? So with whom lies the liability of the AI making a mistake? There have been a couple of interesting legal challenges to the idea that AI constructs an agency. There was an inventor who I think tried to create a patent or register a patent that was created by AI in New Zealand and Australia, and it was denied by the court. So the court's opinion in Australia and New Zealand said that only humans could hold creative credit for a creative work, what constitutes essentially a patent. So from my point of view, there is I would say a legal gap or a gap in terms of what the law actually would instruct at the moment, or let me not pretend to be a lawyer. There is an incompatibility between what we could technically do and then where the credit and liability lies. Potentially would lie with the creator and controller of that AI. And if that then is attributed to a DAO, then you have another kind of questions of who gets creative credit for a DAO. So could you consider this as a legal person like a company, or is it something different? Again, very, very unclear questions, and I think we have a lot of things to consider essentially for the future in terms of those kind of ideas. The other thing I would say is we have to also think between what is an algorithm with a deterministic output and what could be constructed as a generative system on AI that we cannot predict what it will do fully and 100% from the get-go. So with an algorithm, I think the creativity attribution would be to the creator, whereas with an AI model, it's a little bit more convoluted and complex.
Okay, yeah. So, but in the system you're proposing, you have the options, right? You could create an AI that can generate profit for you or wealth, or you can benefit somehow. You could generate something that does not do that. So if it does not, so if it works and it's getting lots of incentives to do what it is doing in a better way, how is this AI going to utilize the incentive they are receiving? Is there an option? Is there an option that they can just, like in the original DAO, that they can just invest in other AIs they think they are doing well, so it becomes a kind of an imitation game?
We could end up with this kind of scenarios, or AIs that create other AIs that are are increasing essentially the token allocation of a particular treasury. So it's I think we are still early on in thinking how we can use and structure the relationship between blockchain governance and what an AI does. And also there's a question, for example, of time, how often do you actually check what the AI is doing? Do you connect it with a DAO treasury, or will this always be an AI that is deployed by a single physical person, right? To give an example, right, you have AIs that at the moment, AI agents at the moment do trading, right? So I can deploy one on say, you don't even need to go to the blockchain example, right? This could be done on any kind of trading platform where you give it a parameters and then the AI tries to optimize your trade so that you gain more money in a sense. So I would say you might get a good example if you, or you might get a good outcome if you structure the governance correctly and it benefits the DAO, or you might also get examples where the AI only works to benefit a particular player within the participants of the system. But at least in our scenario, we're trying to find ways to restrict and control this and govern this in a way that the design team, or let's say the AEC team as a collective gains, rather than one individual company or individual engineer gain from the activity of machine learning.
Okay.
Good. That was an interesting question. Any other questions?
People are very serious here looking at the screen, and
Okay.
I think we can keep going then.
Okay, so we will look into a little bit on ArchiDAO and what we're doing at the moment. A lot of the templates you're going to see later on, you can find them through the Token Engineering Academy or the Token Engineering Commons. I'm happy to provide links for this if they're difficult to Google, but simple Google will actually get you really all of it. So I'll explain what ArchiDAO is and how we are trying to structure it. And also I'll explain how we're looking at smart contracts as common pool resources in a DAO, because we think it makes better business sense, essentially, for any kind of particular stakeholders, if you will. So ArchiDAO was created at the end of 2021 in December, where from 7 or 8 people who came together and thought, let's create a DAO for fun. Was invited to the party essentially because of my work on blockchain for architecture, and there are a lot of ways to understand the DAO. It is a community. It is a community of people who want to learn. It is also a community of people who want to work together in architecture. And initially, we went through an introspection phase of what we would do and how we would organize things. And it became very clear during 2022 that it's very difficult to sustain any kind of activity without essentially funding, because we all have day jobs, and this kind of trailed off during the end of 2022. And in 2023, we kind of relaunched part of what we're trying to do by focusing on developing certain products and services that, through a common pool resource idea, through an idea of developing for public good, which you can at least maintain the organization at a good level. We have done certain architectural design competitions, put our name on the map. We have also done a lot of creative workshops for the metaverse, or what people might think is the metaverse. And these kind of ideas already can continue depending on what the members want to do. So I'll explain at the moment the philosophy behind the blockchain part of the organization, right? So how do we intend to run it, and what we're building at the moment on smart contracts. And then I'll show you the template we use, but I won't show you the exact structure as we are still developing that. So a lot of the inspiration for structuring the token system for ArchiDAO comes from the underlying model for CyberSyn. And CyberSyn was a distributed decentralized system where edge nodes and work units can make decisions autonomously while still serving the overall purpose and cohesion of the organization. And this was a kind of application of the viable system model by Sanford Beer into the production processes of the country of Chile, right before the coup by Pinochet that dethroned Allende. And the idea there is that you can have essentially a kind of overview of what is going on into a production environment, but you don't need to control it top down. All you need to do is you need to set up the triangle of intelligence, policy, and cohesion. Policy is a set of rules. Cohesion is a set of constraints in terms of how you might do things. And intelligence is the collective, accumulative thinking of everybody in the organization. And if you set up the viable system model correctly in terms of its interactions, you get what you see on the right-hand side, which is certain decentralized autonomous units on the right, providing information and production for the total environment on the left side. A lot of the concepts on the model come from translating the ideas of homeostasis and metabolism, right? So you get processes that arrive essentially at an energy balance in the end. And there's a great cybernetic concept, essentially, or rather, the viable system model is related to one strand of second-order cybernetics, but I won't go too much into it at the moment. So this is kind of like our inspiration of what we want ArchiDAO to look like in the end. And then we looked into, part of the viable system model, when we were discussing it, looked like something that emerges bottom up. And within design, the concept of emergence gives light to the concept of sigmergy, right? So producing work, ergo, through sigma, through signs that exist in the environment that you're working in. The most classic example from nature would be bees building their own hive, or termites building a termite mound without actually having an overall plan from the beginning, but coordinating bottom up through the actual working out of the construction. And through this, we looked through the concept of sigmergy into understanding what others have done before us, even without referring to blockchain, but whether this concept did exist before in CAD, so computer-aided design architectural literature. We looked at the database of HumanCAD, and we tried to focus on collective authorship. So the idea that you are producing something not as a single architect getting all the glory, but as a team of people collectively working together, which is the target also of ArchiDAO. And by doing a thorough literature review, we came up with 8 points, 8 principles, if you will. Whether there is communication between members, whether there is communication between members and the object, and this is important in sigmergy. Is there a feedback loop? Is remote collaboration allowed? Is there a computer protocol involved? Are shared commons involved? There seems to be a connection between collective authorship and shared common values, whether these are in the ethical sense or also in the material sense. And then we added, so principles 1 to 6 are really evident in the literature. But the moment you start asking how decentralized the system is, so principle number 7, or if there is the idea of a substrate, so the medium that actually takes the sigma to produce ergo, so to take the sign on and produce work, we see that a lot of the literature is valued with either 0 or 1 or maybe a 2. So these ideas are maybe not existent at the moment in literature, or they only exist in very, very, very light touch compared to other principles. So from that kind of analysis and the imposition of a viable system model, we went into the thinking that we could actually start thinking of using, modeling certain of the smart contracts onto ArchiDAO. We came up with the stick merging principles and the idea that you would have a non-fungible token that would represent an agent participating in ArchiDAO. And I can predict the question already, what is an agent? We'll see about that a couple of slides later, actually on the next slide, I think. And we set up a whole kind of idea of principles that are in correspondence to the sigmergic principles, but also to the ideas of from common pool resources. Now, the NFT at the moment acts as an identity, but also as a soul-bound token. So it's connected directly to the agent participating in the DAO. And this allows you to stake onto the ArchiDAO smart contract that allows you to participate in the organization, but also allows you to participate in any project that is for profit and set up by the DAO. And we started to see essentially how we would be able to decentralize projects as well. And this gave rise also to the idea that we would need to pay people between projects and also create a kind of self-treasury. So this is where we are still, this is still a work in progress. We are on a good level in terms of the ArchiDAO NFT. We are now in testing phase, and we're now designing the ArchiDAO payment and the ArchiDAO staking. We're a little bit unclear still whether we would use the ArchiDAO payment as a stand-in for a stablecoin, or whether the ArchiDAO payment and the ArchiDAO staking would be the one and the same token. Probably not. Probably we would still use two tokens that would make processes a lot clearer. The other thing that emerged really as an interesting discussion last year and this current year in 2023 is that we got approached by, or the question arose that companies could be part of the ArchiDAO and work or contribute and gain from this idea that we can build a set of contracts for BIM and blockchain, which is our first kind of complete smart contract product. And as soon as you have companies, you can also start asking the question, similar to what Abel was asking now, could you have an AI participating internally into the organization? And is this controlled by single physical person, or is it controlled by a company, or is it controlled by the full DAO? Currently, in its current form, we have a set of multi-sig wallets that control the treasury of the DAO and also controls our internal voting system. And internally, we can see essentially ArchiDAO members and also project workers. So you could actually buy part of the ArchiDAO staking, use it to stake into a project and gain from a project without actually having governance over the organization. You only have governance over a particular project you might be interested in. And we're thinking this is better than asking people to become full members of the DAO, because as a full member, you also get more responsibility about governance of the whole organization. Whereas with staking on a project, it becomes much more easier for someone to start participating without needing to be a full member. So the tokens that we have them at the moment, right? So the payment token pays for work and production, compensates members. Staking allows members to have decision making rights on a project and connect stakes with incentives. And the ArchiDAO NFT is the one that makes you an ArchiDAO member. You can access member area, vote for core group and council, vote for treasury decisions, right? So for example, the ArchiDAO council could decide, for example, to fund a particular educational program or contribute to other public goods. And also vote for decisions to be executed on multi-sig wallet, right? So vote on where the funds of the organization might be put into. We don't have a lot of money, by the way. So if anybody wants to contribute, we would happily take donations. And you can also become a member. And I'll talk now a little bit more about the project process we thought of, and we are in the process of building, right? So you can see here how you can create a project contract. You can see that we haven't thought yet how investors participate, right? Even though we did have it, we do have them as external stakeholders. And we're now in the process of building that streamline and mechanism here. But the way a customer might develop is that they would buy a contract NFT, a non-fungible token. These would then get activated after we set milestones and deliverables. When the customer is happy with this, they validate it, so that begins to count as time. And then on the other side, inside the organization, as soon as this is validated, you get funds deposited into an escrow account. And then you have three processes here. The red is the ArchiDAO member working on the project, right? So initially we have, how do you validate your NFT? And this happens through our multisig. So people can become a member only if existing members validate you. Because we want to make sure that anything that is soulbound is related to a particular person. And we can also then customize the NFT to reflect their own track record, because the NFT also acts as an identity. This gives you the opportunity to buy staking tokens, and at the same time, you get another project contract here that handles stakes and payments. And as soon as a milestone is reached, you can then get stable coins assigned and then earned as soon as the project is finished. And of course, stakes get burned as you exchange tokens essentially. As soon as the contract ends, you also get your NFT updated and you kind of level up. Your experience becomes better from that point of view. And this gets back again to the client who needs to validate, the customer who needs to validate that all deliverables have been met. And the idea here is that we would need to develop the contracts that can handle this project here. Our idea is that we would create essentially a set of contracts that would work almost like the underbelly of a common document environment. And we would allow any company to create their own interface to our own contract. So the ArchiDAO multisig controls the contract here. Our first prototype is being used only for timestamping. And anytime you use it, part of the funds go to ArchiDAO Treasury, but they might also be returned to the company that has driven someone to the smart contract. And through this kind of third revenue approach, you can have companies participating in the DAO, and they can still have some part of the incentive to create a better CDE. Sorry about that, I needed to be here. And we understand here that we will have essentially a set of payment to blockchain smart contracts, kind of tracking the whole AC process from concept to design to construction to operations, including potentially supply chain. And the only business model we think might be easier to do as a DAO rather than as a single company would be one where all companies participating kind of own or are members of the DAO and own this as a common pool resource. So the Archidao treasury is then used again to maintain this, but there is also a clear incentive for companies either providing a CDE as an interface or companies participating to collectively maintain and build these smart contracts, or at least pay for them. To design all this, we are using the token engineering canvases, which we can go through as part of the workshop. The first one is called the token economy canvas, and essentially is a translation of the classic business model canvas into a token. And you can see here it has a structure of a problem, existing alternative, scale and growth, east to us and circulation. You need to describe the economy, right, of what the economy does and how it works. And that's what I was trying to explain with our idea of smart contracts as common pool resource between AEC companies. You know, why blockchain? Why do you need blockchain? Which I think is the first step someone would take to fill this in. And then taking a look at governance, stakeholders, incentives, and outside economy. We mentioned that this is potentially a better example than having a single company running a set of smart contracts, in the sense that you try to also get a decentralization of incentives and sharing of potential benefits. But also it avoids, let's say, what I call bolt-on blockchain business models, right? So a business model that you could run on your own potentially doesn't need blockchain on the outset, at least not on the economy level. And to be able to fill this in a little bit more carefully, you take a look at your ecosystem, right? So what is Archidao doing? Or what is the DAO you're trying to build doing? And then you try to use this as a map of what you have on your system. And then you try to map out the motivation matrix, right? So you're trying to understand who is providing value to whom else within the ecosystem. And this will kind of create a very clear idea of the interrelationship between your stakeholders, your users, your current companies, and so forth. Then in sequence, this gets broken down into a much simpler model as well, where you are trying to break the value exchange into activities. And further, you can also break this down in using universal modeling language, so UML, which will then create the specs for your smart contract. And in theory, this makes it much more simpler to write one. And then also you get this really table, very concise table of what are taking on with each one of these activities, right? So you collect them. You'll probably have more of these activities as circles. And then you're looking into discussing in the governance of this, and these are directly these are questions that are directly mapped to Ostrom principles. So, for example, you say how precisely it is defined who is an ecosystem member and who is not, right? So, Ostrom has outlined these principles for common pool resources, and these questions help you kind of map out how you can abide with the idea of common pool resources and how clearly you can actually encode this probably on the smart contract level.
Can I ask something?
Please do.
Yeah. So can you describe in a few words the ontology for the ecosystem? Because between this slide you have on the screen now and the previous one, there is a very big jump. So now
Yes.
you have, so you have activities, and then the next one is almost like the vision, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you have
So
in between?
so in between you have a very long list of translating your main vision with you need to kind of build it here
Mm-hmm.
into smaller steps that will go into this table.
There
And
is,
at the moment,
I
sorry,
think that would be very difficult, very, very difficult.
it is.
Yeah,
I can't.
because
Yeah.
you have other three things in between missing, huh? Do you know what
Yeah.
they are?
Go on then.
So you have, so in systems, yeah, you would have, of course, below activities, you would have actions. And
Yeah.
then above activities, you would have your functions, right?
Yep.
Above your functions, you would have your services. And above services, you would have your capabilities. And then when you know what your capabilities are, then you can define what the vision is and all that.
Yeah.
I think it's just a very big jump. Even if you complete that table, I'm just thinking, even if you complete that table, you won't know what are the functions you're looking for, what are the services you're looking for, and what are the capabilities for whatever system you're designing.
True. True. So there is. Sorry. Go on.
Yeah, and then eventually you can say, okay, and this is the big picture. Yeah, and you need to establish the relationships between all those different elements in your ontology.
Yes, and it takes a lot more diagramming essentially of the type that we see from an essential activity, drilling down into functions and actions and how these are then completed, and you can get really confused and lost really fast. So I was trying to provide more of the basic kind of strategic canvases we use at the moment. I don't have it as part of the PPT, but I can show the messy diagrams we do to kind of complete the picture. And again, as I said, this is still not finished work, but something that it's still developing, right? So you might remember last year we only had the non-fungible token as an ID system, and we didn't even know that we would go into developing a set of smart contracts for BIM. And at the moment, where we are at as an organization is we are trying to establish, we do have a version of this, right, as stakeholders, but you also need to go into the level where you understand, okay, I predict, for example, I might have surveyors and engineers participating, who exactly can be that in our idea of the system. So part of the deal is also mapping out what exists now as an ecosystem and what you might want to shape as the future, if you will. But yes, this is not a complete version.
No, yeah, it's not. And I'm just thinking here that that you are using us as a stakeholders, right? Please.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yeah. So the idea here is that anybody who might be using the system is a stakeholder and could potentially be also part of the organization.
Yeah.
This gives a little bit of a good segue on to a more of an architectural design project that I'll present last, and then we can have more questions. So I'll present a model of what we think might become a DAO as part of AEC in the future, where your actual users of the project could be part of the DAO. Also connected with the design and construction project. So this is a competition we did as ArchiDAO, plus with my office, Adventures Architecture. and to the people that worked on it. And this was a bridge that was designed for the South Park of Sofia, which is the capital of Bulgaria. It was a professional competition for architects. And the point was to create more of a connection between the north part and the south part of South Park. The south part was already kind of well organized and had already an updated master plan, whereas the north part was what we kind of get a lot of times in the Balkans, which is a kind of leftover space in the park with a master plan that is kind of partially fulfilled. So the competition was asking for two things: a clear organic connection between the two parts and clarification of how the master plan of the north part could kind of develop. And we came to this competition by looking at not only kind of classical network theories of how we could have a master plan emerge and also clarify functions of use and still retain the idea that this is a leisure park. And through this, we got kind of main spine developed, as you can see in the small pictures on the small diagrams on the left-hand side. And this would become essentially a pathway and a bridge above this road that will connect north and south. But we also introduced the idea that we would use blockchain not only to run the project, but also to partially fund it through the citizens with crowdfunding approaches. And we would introduce mechanisms where the citizens could also have certain decision making on what the structure would look like. And here we have a kind of conflict between design in a top-down fashion, as we would do it as architects, but also prescribing or scripting, if you will, certain discrete elements. And we went with discretization because it's easier to talk to conceptually tokenize. And so discrete elements on the bridge, and this would be part of the railings and the deck of the bridge and the deck of the whole pathway, but also certain discrete elements that once collected in a bottom-up approach would create this kind of follies that could house leisure functions at the park. I think it takes some time for slides to update. And you see a exploded axonometric of the main elements of the bridge, essentially, and all of the smaller elements that would be consisting our architecture. And on top, essentially, we get a very nice breakdown, on the right-hand side of how we would break the project in phases, and you would get essentially staking mechanisms with citizens kind of adopting part of the bridge, but also connecting their stakes with a particular piece of the bridge. And I hope this is a little bit more clear. So on the top, you get phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. Through phase 2 and phase 3, you adopt tokens that then are connected to parts of the discrete elements of the bridge. And then through construction, you can always vote on certain aspects of it. So geometry, coloring of parts of the bridge, and also functionality of the and coloring of the folies that you have there. So from our perspective, we would create essentially a whole architectural design that would leave parts of it open to crowdfunding by the citizens, which would then use their tokens to also make decisions in terms of functions and in terms of potentially also maintaining it later on and so on and so forth. You could also kind of see this as providing other innovative business models where people, between public and private funding, where people might also share part of the revenue generated by one of the folies if this is what they voted for. We didn't win, by the way, but at least we created a concept that we can work on for future projects. And with that, that's me for now. And yeah, happy to take any questions and or even go through the templates again or our current thinking. Again, anyone who is part of the CBC and everybody in the workshop, you're all welcome to join us in the sessions we do in ArchiDAO and help us build this as a collective.